I sold the last piece of our family's land in Jamaica so my son could have the wedding of his dreams. And when I flew in for the ceremony, they sat me next to the trash bins behind the kitchen door. They hid me away like a shameful secret, but they forgot one thing. A mother who sacrificed everything does not sit in the shadows. This is the story of how I rose from the corner that smelled of scraps and made an entire room look me in the eye. The sun had barely shrugged itself over the blue mountains when I closed the gate to my cottage for what I told myself was a brief goodbye. The hibiscus still held last night's rain, and the smell of roasted pimento lingered from the neighbor's breakfast fire. I pressed those details into memory the way a child flattens flowers between pages because I feared they might feel thinner after today. My name is Lillian Campbell, 72 years alive. 44 of them spent teaching arithmetic beneath a rusted roof in Hanover Parish. And until 6 months ago, I still owned a sliver of hillside that had carried my family's footprints since emancipation. Theo, my only son, grew upon that slope chasing goats and cricket balls. But as soon as his scholarship carried him to Atlanta, he learned to sprint after larger things. Degrees, stock options, a fiancée named Elise who spoke about brand alignment, the same way my neighbors talked about church bake sales. When Theo phoned to say the ballroom at Rosebridge Pavilion cost almost as much as my entire plot, I heard something shaky under his practiced confidence. Fear of disappointing the circles he was marrying into. I swallowed the lump in my throat and told him land can regrow value, but a wedding day happens once. The paperwork with the Kingston developer took 12 minutes. 5 generations of soil moved with the click of a pen. So I boarded Caribbean Airlines with a cedar box of that very soil tucked inside my handbag, intending to pour a pinch into the Unity vase to remind Theo where his roots drank. The flight was a smooth hush until landing, when the cabin filled with the sterile chill of Hartsfield-Jackson's jet bridges. A cab ferried me to a midtown hotel so glossy I could see my anxious reflection in every facade. My room sat high enough that downtown looked like a child's marble set, a view that felt impressive and vaguely unreal. I spent wedding morning steaming the royal blue lace dress Miss Marva had stitched by hand. Elise's mood board email had specified champagne and ivory, but blue is the color of the deep bay that cradled Theo's childhood. I pinned my mother's silver hibiscus brooch to the collar, powdered the shine from my cheeks, and thanked God for the chance to watch my child step into joy. At noon, the rideshare dropped me beneath Rosebridge's colonnade, a terrace of cold stone guarded by cherubs that never tasted sea breeze. The planner waited, hair tight, smile tighter. "Mrs. Campbell, we're thrilled you made it. Follow me for pre-ceremony seating." I kept pace, heels clicking across marble. We passed a corridor of gold-framed mirrors, then another lined with hydrangea towers. The music of a string quartet swelled, but the planner didn't slow. She veered through a service door trimmed in fake boxwood. On the other side, the air changed, warm, greasy, tinged with bleach. A hallway of rubber mats and silver trays led to an alcove no wider than a pantry. 2 stainless trash carts braced the walls, lids open like yawns. Between them, a plastic banquet chair draped with a single napkin. "Section G service," the planner announced, consulting her tablet. "Your assigned seat." She set a laminated name card on the chair, nodded, and retreated before I gathered words to protest. The door swung shut, sealing me into a hush, broken only by the hiss of dish sprayers and the rough scrape of plates being cleared before the first course was even served. My pulse hammered. I had imagined Theo scanning the front rows for his mother's smile, Instead, I sat flanked by refuse bins, the lace of my dress already catching the smell of fryer oil. I wanted to believe a mistake had been made, but the place card bore my name with unnerving certainty. The indignity prickled hotter than the Atlanta afternoon. I had paid for marble pillars, yet been anchored beside trash. Shame flushed my neck, chased by a colder realization. Somebody had judged that my presence, my accent, my blue dress risked dulling the shine of their spectacle. I set the cedar box on my lap. Inside, the earth shifted softly against the polished wood. Mounting anger slowed my breathing, forging each inhale into something steadier than tears. I thought of my grandmother, who taught me that soil remembers every footstep and returns dignity to those who honor it. Her words rose now, firm as bedrock. Stand tall even if the ground is uneven. So I straightened my back, fixed the hibiscus brooch at my throat, and waited. Not as discarded furniture, but as witness. In a few minutes, the ushers would draw back the ballroom doors, and Theo would step through. When his gaze finally reached this corner of shadows and steel bins, he would learn whether the foundation of a new life can truly hold when it tries to bury the bedrock beneath it. I did not yet know how I would reclaim my place, only that I would, because no son of mine would begin marriage atop a lie that his mother or her homeland were anything less than worthy. Somewhere beyond the hum of compressors, the quartet struck the first notes of the processional. I closed my eyes, felt the island soil warm in my hands, and prepared to rise. The music behind the doors rose and fell like a distant tide, violins announcing bridesmaids, cellos cradling vows I could only half catch between the clang of stock pots and the barked yes chef of line cooks. Every cheer that leaked through the crack felt like a stone dropped down a well, echoing somewhere too deep for me to reach. I sat straight, palms resting on the cedar box, and studied the rhythm of the corridor. Servers bursting through, balancing towers of plated salads, returning with empty china and conversation about tips. No one looked at me for more than a heartbeat. Eye contact would have required questions, and questions slow a service line. Yet one young waitress paused. A curl had sprung loose from her hairnet and flour dusted her sleeve. She scanned the name card on my chair, then my face. "Ma'am, do you need water?" The kindness in her whisper landed like cool cloth on a fever. I thanked her. She fetched a crystal goblet, likely stolen from a VIP table, and left it in my hand with a timid squeeze. The first sip steadied me. The second lit a spark. A stranger could see my dignity. Why not my own child? Applause thundered. Ceremony finished. Doors swung wider now as guests drifted toward cocktail hour. Through the gap, I glimpsed Theo, tall and proud in his charcoal suit, one arm looped around Elise's waist. Their smiles flashed for photographers, then for donors, then for friends from business school. I waited. A mother feels when her child's eyes land on her, even at 50 meters. It never happened. Theo's gaze skimmed the crowd and slid away before it reached the corridor mouth. Whether that failure was accident or intention, I could not tell, but the spark inside me flared into living flame. The planner returned, flanked by 2 busboys rolling a cart stacked with bread baskets. "Dinner service begins in 20 minutes, she said briskly, gesturing at the bins. "Please remain clear of the swing path." It was the tone used for folding chairs and coat racks. I rose. "No, thank you," I answered, matching her cheerfulness note for brittle note. "I will take my proper seat now." She blinked, consultant smile cracking. "I'm afraid the floor plan is fixed. Additional seating was paid for by the woman standing before you." I lifted the cedar box so she could read the shipping tag with the venue's own address. I purchased more than stone and linen. I purchased respect. Heat rushed to her cheeks. "Mrs. Campbell, please, guests will see." "Exactly." I stepped past her, skirts brushing steel. The movement startled a pair of groomsmen loitering for drinks. They parted, unsure whether to block or escort me. I chose neither, walking the corridor until the ballroom's full radiance spilled over me. Chandeliers ringing like frozen rain, centerpieces climbing in spirals of orchids, and, at the far head table, an empty chair draped in ivory, a place card bearing my name turned neatly face down. I felt, rather than heard, the hush that spread. Forks paused. Conversation snagged on invisible thorns. Somewhere a wineglass chimed against another, nervous or celebratory, I could not tell. I advanced to that shamed chair, lifted the card, and set the cedar box upon the charger. Theo appeared then, threading through tables with Elise trailing, her gown stirring votive candles in her wake. Up close, my son looked older, worry etched beside the excitement. "Mama, why aren't you in the holding area?" His words were soft, but the microphone clipped to his lapel betrayed him, carrying the question across hidden speakers. Every ear in the hall heard the phrase holding area and recoiled. "I sat with garbage long enough," I replied, voice carrying without aid. "Now I sit with family, or I do not sit at all." Murmurs surged like restless surf. Elisa's father, a banker accustomed to crises, rose halfway as if to mediate, then thought better of it. Theo's eyes darted to the planner, who hovered at the ballroom edge, clutching her tablet like a shield. It was Elise who spoke first, surprise in her tremor. "Mrs. Campbell, we never meant— when intent hides behind protocol, harm still walks free," I said. Then softer to Theo alone. "My boy, did you taste the sea when she kissed you at the altar? Because that is where you come from." I tapped the cedar lid. "And this is the earth that fed you. It will not be hidden behind swinging doors." Theo's shoulders slumped, pride collapsing into something humbler. He turned, murmured to the planner. She vanished, returned with 2 servers dragging my former trash bin thrown forward. Bins absent, chair polished, a fresh velvet cushion offered like a treaty. Theo lifted the cushion himself, placed it beside Elisa's mother, and guided me to sit. When I did, the hall exhaled. Forks found plates again, strings resumed their gentle waltz. Before returning to his place, my son knelt, an absurd motion in pressed tuxedo, and pressed his forehead to my hand the way he once did as a feverish child. The hibiscus brooch glinted between us. "Forgive me, Mama," he whispered, voice cracking. "Teach me how to honor what anchors me." I closed his fingers around the cedar box. "Begin with this," I said, "and when you pour it into your marriage soil, remember, roots ignored will rise through marble sooner or later." He nodded, tears bright, and returned to his bride. I glanced around. Some guests watched in wonder, others in discomfort, but the shame was no longer mine. I unfolded my napkin, smooth as ocean calm, and waited for the first course. Appetite restored, dignity seated, trash left where it belonged. Outside my story. Dinner resumed, but conversation had changed timbre, as if invisible hands had retuned every fork and flute. Guests at nearby tables stole shy glances toward me, then toward Theo and Elise, their curiosity seasoned with a respect that had not existed an hour before. The quartet, sensing new undertones in the room, slipped from waltz into a gentle calypso. Even the chandeliers seemed warmer, their light no longer icy but amber, as though they too accepted the lesson in humility. A server, John stitched in gold on his waistcoat, bent to my ear. "Ma'am, chef would like permission to send you a tasting plate of every course you missed." In his eyes I saw no pity, only earnest atonement. I thanked him. Soon a china sampler arrived. Jerk-rubbed salmon balanced by peach chutney, miniature sweet potato soufflé, a single herb roasted quail wing. I tasted slowly, letting each spice remind me of home markets, pimento, thyme, a ghost of Scotch bonnet bravery. With every bite, the humiliation receded another length like tide drawn from shore. At the head of the table, Elise's mother, Mrs. Whitfield Sloane, shifted, gathering courage. "Mrs. Campbell," she began, voice brittle yet sincere, "our family owes you more than an apology." She lifted her champagne. "You financed this marvel, though we were strangers. Tonight you gifted us a lesson finer than gold leaf to roots." She raised her glass higher. Guests followed. Crystal chimed in a ripple that reached even the furthest table. I acknowledged with the dip of my hibiscus brooch. The bloom felt sturdier as though watered by that sound. Dessert was announced, and the doors to the adjoining terrace opened, releasing evening's cool breath. Lanterns swayed like slow fireflies above a coffee cart and towers of pastel macarons. Couples drifted outside, laughter tentative at first, then brighter. I remained seated, content to watch. But soon Uncle Maurice, the only kin able to attend from Jamaica besides me, approached, cane tapping. "Come, Lily. Time we show them how Hanover feet remember Mento." The band had switched again, coaxing a lilting rhythm from upright bass and muted trumpet. My knees protested, yet my heart rose. I allowed him to guide me to the terrace. The wooden planks felt strange beneath heels that knew bare ground, but Uncle Maurice set an easy pace. 1-2 pause, rock step, the shuffle our grandparents danced under kerosene lamps. Young guests formed a curious ring. Some imitated, stiff at first. Elise watched, cheeks glowing, then tugged Theo forward. He hesitated only a breath before matching my footwork, a son relearning soil memory through movement. Soon the terrace blurred into swirl, tuxedos loosening, gowns twirling, banker souls scuffing happily. The band caught the energy, horns brightening. Laughter rose into the lantern glow and escaped into Atlanta's night sky. During a pause for water, Elise approached with a linen envelope. "Mrs. Campbell, I found this at Theo's place card." Inside was a handwritten note. "Mother, when tonight ends, let's pour your red earth together into a planter for our first home. I promise every child of ours will know its story. Theo." The words steadied something inside me that had rattled since the planner's clipboard. "Thank you, child," I said softly. "Hold him to that promise." She nodded, eyes bright. Later, coffee steaming in my hand, I noticed the planner standing alone by a marble column, tablet clutched like a shield turned obsolete. Her shoulders sagged. I walked over. She startled, then straightened. "Mrs. Campbell, I held up a palm. "We both served tonight. Service requires sight. Next time, see every guest." Her exhale was half apology, half relief. "I will," she whispered. Midnight crept close. Candles guttered low. Theo signaled the DJ, who quieted the music. He took the microphone, voice carrying a gentleness unfamiliar from corporate presentations. "Friends, my mother's story tonight reminded me of the parable of the cornerstone. The stone builders rejected that became the foundation. I nearly threw mine away." He turned toward me. "Mama, in front of everyone, I honor what you gave up for me. This celebration will echo only if it stands on gratitude." Then to the hall, "Tomorrow we'll host a brunch at our apartment. Please come dressed in island blue to celebrate the soil that raised me." Applause answered, some polite, most heartfelt, followed by a swelling hush of collective reflection. As lights dimmed and final farewells fluttered like moths, Theo escorted me to the exit. Outside, valet lanterns painted pools of gold on the drive. He opened my rideshare door, then surprised me by climbing in beside me, leaving the limousine for others. Hotels feel cold tonight, he said. May I ride back and hear about grandfather's cocoa trees? The car pulled away, Atlanta's towers receding, and I began a story about saplings bent by hurricane winds yet still bearing fruit. Theo listened, head bowed, the cedar box safe on his lap, legacy reclaimed, wedding lesson sealed. And somewhere behind us, in a pavilion now emptied of guests, the scent of pimento and island song lingered in corners no planner could chart, a quiet reminder etched into marble. Roots, once revealed, re-anchor everything. Morning arrived with the hush that follows thunder. Atlanta's skyline, usually proud as a peacock, looked subdued beyond Theo and Elise's balcony, its glass towers soft in hazy light. Inside their apartment boxes still lined the walls, evidence of a life not yet settled, but the dining table glowed. White cloth, mismatched china, and a blue strip of my lace dress repurposed as a runner. At its center, a clay planter waited, half filled with potting soil. Elise met me at the door, wearing a cotton shift the color of Caribbean shallows. You're early, Mrs. Campbell. Breakfast isn't quite. Early birds bless the pot, I replied, lifting the cedar box. May I? She nodded, stepping aside. Theo appeared from the kitchen, sleeves rolled, plantain slices sizzling behind him. His eyes carried the tinge of someone who'd slept little yet dreamed hard. Ready, Mama. I loosened the lid. Red-brown earth, sun-dried in Hanover and scented faintly of nutmeg groves, breathed into the room. We three cupped handfuls and let it tumble into the planter. The soil made a soft hush, like pages turning in a hymn book. Theo pressed it flat, then planted a cocoa seedling I'd smuggled under agricultural declaration. First roots, he murmured. The doorbell chimed. Elise's friends from design school arrived in flowy blue scarves. Julian's parents did not appear. Rumor said they were resting at their lake house, digesting last night's lesson. Instead came Uncle Maurice with fresh callaloo, the waitress Mina from the pavilion carrying a foil pan of bread pudding, chef's compliments, and even Mrs. Whitfield Sloane clasping a crystal vase of hydrangeas tinged pale azure. Each guest took a small scoop of Jamaica's earth, pressing it around the seedling's base as if sealing a pact. Breakfast was simple. Johnny cakes, mango slices, strong Blue Mountain coffee. Conversation folded gently around the table. No one mentioned marble or RSVPs. Mina shyly presented her tray to me. I tasted regret in their kitchen, but I wanted you to taste sweetness. I hugged her, grease and all. Kindness once given always circles back. Theo clinked a spoon against his mug. Friends? Yesterday, my mother reminded us that honoring beginnings safeguards endings. He reached into a paper envelope and drew the turned-down place card, still creased. This was my failure. We're going to keep it by the planter as warning. Then he faced me fully. Mama, Elise and I decided the first room furnished in this apartment will be our study, and the first book on its shelf will be the Campbell family ledger, if you'll write it with us. I swallowed the lump rising behind my collar. I will write, yes, but you must read aloud to every child yet to come. Laughter fluttered. Even Mrs. Whitfield Sloane dabbed her eye with her linen. After dishes were cleared, guests drifted to the balcony. Atlanta's mid-morning breeze rustled the cocoa leaves. Mina snapped a photo, not staged, merely a keepsake, and promised to send prints on real paper, for frames, not feeds. Theo accompanied me to the lobby when it was time for my taxi. Suitcase wheels echoed. I wired back a down payment, he admitted, cheeks coloring. We can't restore the whole hillside, but we'll start. The land will welcome any bit of itself returned. I laid my palm on his cheek. Just visit it. Walk it barefoot. Apologize with your toes. Outside, the cab idled. Before I climbed in, Elise hurried forward holding a small jar. Inside, a spoonful of last night's centerpiece orchids pressed into sugar. "For tea on your veranda," she said, voice unsteady. "So our sweetness reaches Jamaica too." I kissed her brow. "Remember, child, sweetness tastes richer served freely than showcased." The ride to the airport traced Belle Isle Park, where sycamores flamed with July green. I watched reflections of yesterday, trash bins, bowed heads, fade against the window. At security, an officer lifted the cocoa seedlings customs slip, smiled, and waved me through. In the waiting area, I unwrapped Elise's jar and stirred a little orchid sugar into plain black tea from a vending stand. The blend was imperfect. Plastic cup, lukewarm water, but flavor rose delicate and honest. Forgiveness often brews in such vessels. The plane lifted over Atlanta, clouds quilted the sky. I opened my travel journal and wrote, "When marble forgets earth, earth knocks louder, but when marble listens, both stand stronger." Below I sketched our planter, roots diving, leaves unfurling beneath an Atlanta skyline. The drawing wobbled with turbulence, yet felt steady as hillside bedrock. Hours later, Jamaica's humidity wrapped me like a long-left blanket. Home soil kissed my shoes. As dusk settled, I placed Elise's sugar jar on the veranda rail. Night-blooming jasmine stirred. Waves hushed against the distant reef. I brewed fresh ginger tea, added a spoonful of violet-tinted sweetness, and lifted the cup toward the blue mountains. Somewhere far north, a cocoa seedling reached deeper into blended dirt, nourished by the lesson my humiliation had taught. And here, on my porch, I tasted orchid against ginger, Atlanta mingling with Hanover, proof that when dignity is replanted, it flowers in more than one place at a time. I arrived home just ahead of sunset when the Caribbean flares gold and the sea swallows whole the noise of the world. My cottage roof glowed like burnished copper. 2 neighbor boys chased a football through the hibiscus hedge, their laughter soaring above the tree frogs. Nothing looked changed, yet I walked the pebble path as a stranger might, slow, unsure where memory ended and new knowing began. Inside, the air was cool from shut windows. I set my suitcase by the rocker, then unwrapped the jar of orchid sugar Elise had pressed into my hands. I placed it beside the framed photograph of my parents on their wedding day. Linen suits, bare feet in sand, smiles unafraid of cameras, and whispered, "Roots travel farther than trunks." The room answered with settling boards and distant surf. Mail lay in a neat stack on the table, electric bill, church bulletin, and a cream envelope bearing an Atlanta postmark. The handwriting was Theo's, taut from effort. My fingers trembled, not from dread now, but from the fragile hope that always follows apology. I slid a paring knife under the flap. "Dearest Mama." The morning you flew home, I knelt by the planter and counted the cocoa leaves, 2 new overnight. I decided every new leaf will be a promise kept. Today there are 4, so I must send word of our first promise. The hillside contract is signed. We cannot buy all that was sold, but the western half, where I built my first kite, will be ours again come September. My breath hitched, the room blurred. I continued. Second promise. Elise has asked that our child, whenever God grants one, be christened on that land. She wants the first lullaby to be the rustle of those palms. Tears slipped without heat. I tasted them. Salt, no different from the sea, yet sparkling with something gentler. We also enclose a bank draft. You wired us a palace. We return only a porch, but please repair the cottage roof before hurricane season. The difference we will repay leaf by leaf. A slip of paper fell. A cashier's check large enough to buy corrugated zinc, paint, and maybe a new stove. I pressed it to my heart, then finished the letter's final line. If mistakes are chapters, may this be the prologue of making things right. Outside, night birds called. I folded the letter into my Bible at Proverbs, letting ink meet scripture. I did not sleep long. At cockcrow I rose, tied a headscarf, and walked the goat track up Redemption Ridge, land no longer mine but still willing to share its sunrise. Dew jeweled the grass. Near the crest, Old Beryl tended her cassava mound. She straightened, palms on hips. We hear you schooled the high people in Atlanta, Miss Lily. Word travels faster than trade winds. It was a small lesson, I said. Small for them, mighty for us. She pointed with her machete toward the eastern sky. You showed the young that respect can cross ocean. We stood together watching first lights soak the harbor, gulls wheeled like scraps of silver cloth. A rust-red pickup crawled up the road. Uncle Maurice, punctual as roosters, he leaned out the window. Come, Lillian, church committee's waiting. They want the lace runner for Sunday table. My blue lace, reborn as communion cloth. I nodded and climbed aboard. The committee met under the breadfruit tree beside the church hall. Sister May waved her ledger. Funds thin. Roof needs patching. I placed Theo's check on the table. Gasps fluttered like startled birds. Portion for the cottage roof, I said, but tithe belongs here. Their gratitude rumbled like distant drums. While they discussed nails and paint, I drifted into the sanctuary. Morning light slanted through jalousie shutters, stippling pews with gold. I knelt where my late husband once tuned his banjo for Christmas hymns. Lord, I whispered, thank you for making shame a seed and mercy the rain. Mid-afternoon brought a knock. Postman with another Atlanta envelope, this one thick. Inside, glossy prints from Mina's disposable camera. Snapshots of the breakfast table, guests' blue scarves billowing, Theo's hands cupped around the cocoa seedling, Elise wiping flour on her dress while laughing. At the bottom of the stack, a single candid froze me. Theo standing on the hotel balcony at dawn, cedar box open, earth trickling between his fingers into the planter. His face was not solemn, but quietly delighted, like a boy releasing guppies into a stream. I framed that photograph, set it beside my parents' wedding picture, and stepped back. 2 generations, a beginning and a restoration, now shared one wall. Evening settled. I brewed tea with orchid sugar, sat on the veranda rocker, and listened to tree frogs tune their violins. Somewhere in Georgia, lanterns would be flickering on a high-rise balcony, and a cocoa seedling would be edging taller in mixed soil. I pictured its newest leaf unfurling, thin yet brave, whispering a green yes to every blue mile between us. Tomorrow I would write Theo. Instruct him how to mulch with banana peel, how to read the leaf's curl for thirst, how to wait. But tonight I rocked, sipped sweetness, and let the dusk remind me that a mother's dignity, once reclaimed, becomes shelter wide enough for many souls, even those who once tried to pack it behind swinging kitchen doors. And under the hush of jasmine, I felt the island itself breathe easy, as if the hillside knew its scattered soil was finding its way home, grain by grain, leaf by leaf. Summer's edge slid into August the way dusk slips into the harbor, slow, inevitable, gold-tipped. I spent those weeks as I always had, teaching tables to children beneath the almond tree, tying hibiscus to straighten, thumping breadfruit for ripeness. The difference lay inside me, a steadier beat, as though some bone-deep pendulum had been reset to true time. Every other dawn, an overseas envelope fell through my letter slot, Theo's tidy reports. Leaf 6 unfurled today, Mama. Elise reads psalms aloud while I miss the seedling. She says cocoa like scripture. We met the builder for the hillside. Boundary stones are up. Attached. Receipts for zinc panels and your new stove. Please send the first cake you bake on it, or at least the smell. One envelope held no words, only a folded check, restitution for the portion of land still unrecovered. I endorsed it to the church roof fund instead. The sanctuary leaked sighs during heavy rain. Late August brought the first big test of our freshly mended bridge. Theo called breathless, "Mama." Elise's firm's hosting an autumn gala, Atlanta Botanical Gardens, all her clients. They want us to speak about sustainable sourcing. She asked me to invite you to co-present the soil story behind our cocoa seedlings. The invitation pricked memory of stainless steel bins and the planner's clipboard, but anger no longer roared. It hummed, a generator kept for outages. I asked one question. Will the gala's light reach every seat? Theo hesitated, then answered soft, "Yes, Mama. I'll make sure." The ticket arrived. At the airport, customs eyed my hand luggage, a shallow crate of young cocoa sprouts, and waved me through with a grin. "Returning royalties to the States, Miss Campbell?" I chuckled, teaching them humility, more like. Atlanta met me with crisp air and dogwood leaves already flirting with rust. Theo and Elise greeted me at arrivals holding homemade placards. Roots reunited. The way passers-by smiled told me they'd made our story public, this time in pride, not gossip. Their apartment had changed. The seedling tower occupied prime sunlight. The framed place card lay under glass on the hallway wall, captioned, "Remember the corners." Elise's sewing machine sat beside bolts of blue lace. She'd begun stitching napkins embroidered with tiny hibiscus for the hillside cottage guest room. Day of the gala, Theo insisted I choose my attire first. I selected a linen dress the color of fresh calabash and pinned my silver hibiscus. Elise appeared in midnight blue satin, no bridal champagnes tonight, and handed me a matching shawl. "Champagne stains," she said, wink soft with earned humor. The botanical gardens glimmered under lantern strings. Instead of a clipboard escort, Theo guided me himself, greeting colleagues with the sentence, "Have you met my mother, Miss Lillian Campbell of Hanover Parish, Jamaica?" The soil whisperer. Each handshake carried genuine interest, none of the thin politeness that bruises like overripe fruit. On stage, our panel sat before a screen projecting photographs. The cocoa planter on their balcony, Theo's hands releasing earth. I spoke first, voice steady as surf on reef, telling of my grandparents' ridge and why land, once sold, can still send love like seeds on wind. Faces in the crowd softened, some bowed as if in church. When Theo followed, detailing carbon capture and fair trade promises, the audience already leaned forward, ready to clap every footstep of his journey back home. Afterwards, guests queued to sniff the crates of young cocoa. A CEO of a coffee chain knelt, inhaled the scent, and muttered, "Smells like honesty." He pledged to fund sapling irrigation. Elise's eyes glistened. Near midnight, as staff doused lanterns, I wandered a bamboo path alone. The planner from Rosebridge Pavilion stood there, hair looser, eyes uncertain. She stepped closer. "Mrs. Campbell," she began, voice breaking, "I resigned after your son's wedding. I teach hospitality ethics now." She offered a hand. I shook it, feeling the tremor of a woman who had seen herself in a harsh mirror and decided to polish, not shatter. Back at the apartment, I wrote a final letter to myself in the travel journal. When a root is acknowledged, fruit multiplies. I pressed a fallen dogwood leaf between the pages. The morning flight south banked over reclaimed hillside. Through thin cloud, I imagined boundary stones glinting like shy stars. In my carry-on, one last envelope from Theo. Boarding passes for him and Elise, Christmas in Hanover, cocoa seedlings taller, promises ready for pruning. Below, the Atlantic shimmered. Same water that kisses Jamaica, same water that had once tried to drown dignity behind catering doors. I close my eyes and let the hum of engines sync with the hum of peace inside my ribs, proof that a mother's worth, once rooted, can reroute even flight paths. December in Hanover Parish arrives the way dawn tiptoes into a bedroom, soft pink carrying promises that only the wide awake can see. The morning Theo's flight touched Sangster Airport, mist still clung to banana leaves, and the goats hadn't yet begun their complaining chorus. I stood outside the arrivals gate in my best Sunday dress, hibiscus pins shining. Beside me, the village taxi driver, Clem, polished his rearview mirror for the third time, pretending he wasn't watching my hands tremble with anticipation. Then the doors parted. Theo emerged first, shoulders squared beneath a linen shirt, the color of unripe sorrel. Elise followed, cradling a pot taller than a toddler. Our cocoa seedling, its trunk now finger-thick, leaves the deep green of glass bottles fished from riverbeds. The customs officer had cleared it with a smile and a warning. Plant it quick. Roots are eager. Elise laughed and promised island soil within the hour. The drive up to Redemption Ridge felt shorter than memory. Each curve revealed a vista I'd seen 1,000 times yet. Now examined through my son's widened eyes. Breadfruit trees pregnant with globes. Fishermen's skiffs painted turquoise and lime, the school roof patched with new zinc, paid for by Theo's first hillside dividend. Elise rolled down her window, hair whipping, and gulped the air like mango juice. We arrived just as Sister May and half the choir trundled up the path, parcels balanced on heads, spades, a coil of hose, a chipped enamel basin of water drawn from the spring. Uncle Maurice laid out coconut husk mulch, whistling mento under his breath. A hole had already been dug beneath the ridge's highest tamarind. Wide, deep, expectant. Theo knelt, hands shaking not with weakness but with reverence. He looked up at the gathered circle, farmers in mud-flecked boots, children in mismatched church clothes, my old students now grown, and cleared his throat. This seedling has traveled farther than most people ever will. It carries Atlanta's dawn and Jamaican dusk in the same stem. May its roots stitch those skies together. He lowered the cocoa gently into the cavity. I poured the cedar box's remnants, final grains of ancestral soil, around the root ball. Elise pressed Atlanta potting mix on top. The layers mingled, brown and red, no borderline visible. When the seedling stood firm, Sister May lifted her cracked hymnal and began, "Great is thy faithfulness." Her alto wavered, found pitch, and the ridge answered with a wind that smelled of coming rain. We sang all 3 verses. By Amen, the clouds had opened just enough to baptize the new tree in warm drizzle. Afterwards, we shared a meal on banana leaf plates. Breadfruit roasted over coals, callaloo steamed with garlic, Elise's first attempt at festival dumplings. Lopsided but sweet. The children perched on rocks, listening wide-eyed as Theo told a gentler version of the wedding story, one that focused not on humiliation but on the miracle of second planting. When he reached the part about the place card hanging in their hallway, a girl of 8 raised her hand. "So, the trash cans were the roots, Uncle Theo?" He laughed. "They were the fertilizer, perhaps." Twilight painted the ridge violet. Clem honked twice from the lane. Time for guests to head home before potholes disappeared in darkness. Elise squeezed my arm. "Mrs. Campbell," she whispered, "next Christmas, if God allows. We hope you'll christen your first grandchild right here." The words fluttered in my chest like startled doves. I nodded. unable to speak. That night, the cottage smelled of nutmeg and new beginnings. Theo repaired the hinges on my pantry door while whistling the quartet melody from the wedding processional. Elise sat at my table, flipping through the Campbell family ledger we had begun together. Names, dates, the price paid for the ridge, the price paid to regain half of it, blank pages waiting. She traced a fingertip over the heading and murmured, "History doesn't erase, it rewrites in stronger ink." Before bed, we three stepped onto the veranda. The cocoa seedling, visible in moonlight, cast a slim shadow across freshly turned earth. Frogs croaked hymn-like. Theo slipped an arm around my shoulders. "Mama," he said, voice rough, "thank you for teaching me that dignity planted deep can grow through concrete and marble." I looked at my son, taller than the cottage doorway, and at the woman who had chosen island night over city glitter. My heart, once bruised, beat whole. "The lesson wasn't mine alone," I replied. "It was the ridges, the seas, the trash cans, even the marbles. All soils teach when turned." Inside, the cedar box now lay empty on the mantel, its purpose fulfilled. Yet it seemed heavier than ever, weighted with the invisible, everlasting kind of wealth. 3 months later, March sunlight draped Hanover Parish in gold netting. The cocoa's first tender pods, tiny pale green teardrops, clustered on its bark, proof that grafts of grace can bear fruit quicker than textbooks promise. Word spread. Neighbors trekked up Redemption Ridge to glimpse the miracle tree. They left with stories of Atlanta marble and a mother's stand, stories that mingled caution with hope. One Saturday, while I clipped dry banana leaves, I saw a rental car bumping up the lane, dust halo shimmering behind it. Out stepped a woman in sensible pumps, hair gathered, clipboard under arm. For an instant, I thought time had reversed and the wedding planner had traveled south. But this visitor wore a Jamaica Tourist Board badge. She introduced herself as Ms. Daly, project lead for agritourism initiatives. "We heard about your ridge," she explained, "and the Heritage Cocoa Cooperative you and your son registered last month." Theo indeed had filed papers. Rootrise Cocoa Partnership with profits earmarked 40% for community school lunches. Ms. Daly walked the rows of seedlings sprouting beside the mother tree, asked about soil pH, irrigation, potential visitor trails. I answered, surprise giving way to guarded pride. Before leaving, she handed me a booklet outlining grants for smallholder tours. "Your story," she said, "could bring travelers beyond the resorts, show them dignity of land." As she drove off, rooster tails of dust curling, I laughed aloud. Life had a way of turning corridors of shame into thoroughfares of blessing. Letters from Atlanta now arrived weekly. One bore a sonogram photo, grainy silhouette, perfect curve of spine. Arriving September, the caption read, beneath, Elise's handwriting added, "Name suggestions welcome, something rooted." I pressed the image against my heart and whispered, "Hibiscus if a girl, cedar if a boy," then tucked it into the ledger. Preparations began. Uncle Maurice carved a baptismal font from blue maho. The choir rehearsed a mento-lilted Amazing Grace. Mina, the waitress-turned-friend, mailed a recipe for cinnamon babka she had learned in a new bakery job. She planned to send loaves frozen to be warm for the christening feast. One humid afternoon, Theo phoned, voice buzzing with both excitement and worry. "Mama, Elise's doctor says bed rest. The flight might be impossible." I listened to the wind hush, the plantain leaves, and felt disappointment nudge. Yet the ridge had taught me flexibility. "Then the ridge will travel to them," I decided. "We'll send soil, water from the spring, prayers that cross the water faster than planes." 2 weeks later, I stood in the post office, boxing a mason jar of ridge earth, a vial of spring water sealed tight, and a hand-stitched bib bearing tiny cocoa pods. The clerk weighed the parcel. Curious, I smiled. Baptism kit, international edition. She laughed, stamped it fragile, roots. September came. On a dawn threaded with pink fire, my phone rang. Theo's voice shook with tears and wonder. Mama, meet Lillian Grace Campbell Croft, 6 pounds, lungs like trumpet. He said Elise clutched the jar of soil during labor. Midwife bemused, but indulgent. After the cord was cut, they dabbed a fingertip of ridge earth onto the newborn's brow. Our daughter's first scent was Jamaica, Theo whispered. I set down the phone and let tears salt the morning. Then I walked to the cocoa tree. Its pods were now fist-sized, blushing gold. I pressed my palm to the trunk. You have a cousin, I told it. That evening, the church bell rang without service scheduled. Village children ran to the ridge, lanterns swinging. I spread a rug beneath the mother tree, laid out cups of ginger tea, and showed them the printed photo, the baby's yawning face lit by monitor glow. We passed the image hand to hand. Sister May led a hymn right there, voices weaving with night insects, a lullaby floating unbroken from island to hospital room. When the singing faded, I looked around that circle of faces, old, young, sun-creased, bright-eyed, and felt the fullness of a lesson finally complete. The trash bin corridor, the marble, the planter, the pods, and now a child named after me. Every turn had proven the same quiet truth. When dignity is buried, it germinates. When roots are honored, they bloom wherever carried. Under the lantern light, the cocoa leaves shivered, as if applauding. I closed my eyes, heard distant surf, and understood that I, too, had grown a new leaf, one broad enough to shade generations yet to come.